Welcome back to the ND and Free podcast in partnership with The Awareness Space, a podcast and media platform that explores how NDers can live their truth and feel free in their lives. We hear from inspiring coaches, therapists, experts, and fellow NDers from all over the world. I'm Owen Morgan, a wellbeing coach and an ADHD coach, and I have over 10 years experience in the wellbeing sector. I've interviewed over 500 people across 4 podcasts. I've received my ADHD diagnosis at 41, and it changed my life forever. My mission is to explore how the human spirit and understanding our whole self can bring us a life full of possibilities. Now, guys, speaking of the fact that I've had 500 people over 4 podcasts, this person, I think, has been on all 4 podcasts over the years, and on the 5th podcast, which is my movie podcast, which is on a hiatus. So, Jess, before I go into your intro, it's so cool to bring you into now this show. I really honestly think you've definitely been on 3 different versions of my shows, haven't you, so far, I think?
Yes. Remember when you messaged me that I was like, oh yeah, which ones have I been on? It's really cool when you think of getting to be able to meet people online and how accessible we are to different people now. And I've loved being able to support you over all the years and all the different journeys and all the good that you're putting into the world. So I'm just excited for you to bring me on for this one too.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, because we did a panel show together, didn't we,
Mhm.
with you and some of the other guys. So that was a really, really amazing time. And we heard your story in one of them as well, talking about trauma. And obviously we did our movie podcast, which we hope will come back. I will try and remember to put all the links in the descriptions, but me and Jess talking about movies, and we have other people involved in that, sharing and sending in their audios for movies they've seen. And it was nice just to get away from all this live chat and talk about movies. So I'll try and put all of this in the show notes. But today we are bringing you on. This is a special edition episode, so it's slightly outside of the other stuff we're doing. So talking to you about kind of neurodivergence, how it may fit in to the armed forces, emergency services. Also, we'll touch on suicide. So trigger warning, guys, for anybody listening, just listen with care. So we're just going to dive into kind of work that you're doing, the people you work with, and then basically seeing how that would apply to neurodivergence. We've got some stats with us today, guys, some quotes and things like that. So a little bit different, but you seem like a logical choice for the show. So let's find out more about you, shall we? Which is a bit weird. Now we've talked. But Jessica Rose is a Marine Corps veteran whose journey of resilience and compassion is truly inspiring. As a devoted caregiver to her husband, a Navy veteran bravely battling brain cancer, Jessica Rose channels her experiences into a podcast, Unbreakable Hope, which I edit, everyone, where she uplifts listeners with powerful stories of perseverance and hope. Beyond her podcast, Jessica Rose is an acclaimed author of 2 gratitude journals and the creative mind behind a product store filled with inspirational items that champion mental health and positivity. Her dedication to making a difference doesn't stop there. Crowned Mrs. Petite Worlds America, she is a para rowing coach and the program manager of Oklahoma's veteran rowing program. Wowzers. The Warriors, the Warriors, what they're called. Additionally, she dedicates her research efforts to understanding and preventing suicide and overdose. Sorry, I kind of butchered that a little bit, but it's because I know all of this stuff already, but it's not in the context of a line. I just know it as a friend. So yeah, you've got lots going on. So how do you do all of this, Jess? Is the first question.
I get asked that all the time. I think a lot of it is time management, automation, and my biggest tip, like timers. So I have to have my planner and my schedule. I actually, this kind of actually ties into our conversation a little bit, which is funny. I have a friend who has severe, like debilitating ADHD, and I'll get stuff that pops up all the time. So I saw this thing about how to structure your day and how to do a routine, and I watched it thinking of him, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, that's how I do my day." So yeah, just having a very detailed, like how I organize my to-do list. I'm trying to be intentional with my time as much as possible, and then automate, 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 and accept help when given. That's another big thing too, is I do wear many hats, and if I were to try and do every aspect of every hat all by myself, I would never sleep, and then I'd be a very, very unhappy person because I'd be wanting my
Mhm.
sleep.
Yeah, I think when you're passionate about all these different things and you kind of live for life, you want to live the life that you want to live. So I think that helps, I think, keep the boundaries going. And we talked a lot about this already about self-care, haven't we, in previous episodes? I'm sure we'll touch on it today. But I think some of the work you're doing is really, really powerful and it's based off your own experiences that you've had. So it all ties in nicely. I'm a bit like you. I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart, always will be. I have a job at the moment, but I will be an entrepreneur at heart to the end of time, which is probably why we connect. We have so many crazy, wonderful ideas that we want to implement. Hence, the movie podcast came out of nowhere, which was really great. And it's interesting, yeah, because you said, obviously your friend with the more severe ADHD neurotype. And I think a lot of the self-help tools, like the gratitude journals and all those kind of things, are all going to be useful as well in different ways. So there's a bit of a crossover there. So normally I would ask you to provide context for what you do, but we've covered quite a lot of it there, which is great. So yeah, you said obviously your friend with ADHD. Have you have any other experiences? I mean, where's your sort of level of knowledge of neurodivergence and things like that? Where do you sit on that? Has it been part of your work? Has it popped up basically previously?
I'd say growing. I am a huge absorber of knowledge, so I love to learn more. And recently, some of the audiobooks I listened to had brought up neurodivergency and also trauma, like PTSD. So learning a lot of the cross waves to that. Since I've been a researcher in behavioral health for over a decade, I kind of crossed over more into the neuroscience field with my husband's condition. So I just love all things brain health. So I find it really fascinating. I've, besides absorbing like information and just constantly wanting to learn, I have a good friend of mine, like I said, who has debilitating ADHD. And I also have another loved one close to me who had dyslexia. And it took a very long time to be diagnosed with that. But just remembering the difference in treatment, like people being really frustrated, and then me being able to come in and saying, like, hey, there's something wrong. We need to figure out what's wrong so we can help and we can guide and we can support. And through professional work that I've done, I've interacted with and worked with a lot of people who live with bipolar. So that's something that I have a little bit more professional experience with, but the rest is more just people I know personally and being able to be supportive towards friends and family members and learning more about what exactly is neurodivergency. And that I think alone is like a huge growth. It's like what exactly falls in that category, and then what are the different supports and resources. And it's kind of like so many different things. It's really exciting to learn more about it, to be honest. So I just kind of like I just dive in and I want to learn more.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I love all things brain health, the way the brain operates, the neuroscience. I find it all really fascinating. So maybe that lent well to when I was diagnosed, but I didn't know much about it before I was diagnosed. As you know, it didn't come up, did it, in episodes we did? It wasn't even part of my, even I was like, I'm sure that's just something kids have. I honestly had no idea until I got it that that's the thing. But it's about neurotypes essentially. The way your brain operates is a neurotype. So they are saying, we talk about trauma a lot over the years, that trauma, I don't know if it's official yet, but that is a form of neurodivergence because a trauma reshapes your brain. And it means your brain fires in a different way than would be the natural, most flowing and flexible way you'd need it to be. So it then lands into a neurotype that may be neurodivergent in the way it operates. It's an interesting time right now in research where they're trying to not separate them out, you know? And they say that maybe neurodivergent people are more prone because of the intensity of how they feel things to be affected by traumatic incidents, no matter how big or small. Which is why later on we will talk about neurodivergence within the armed forces, because in theory, they would say those with ADHD, autism are much more likely to get PTSD. There's research in that because of a pre-existing sensitivity to heightened emotion, which makes sense. On paper, it makes sense. Any thoughts there? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I love it. It's interesting.
It's very the chicken egg, right? What came first? Because one of the audiobooks that I was just listening to did talk about that, how trauma can lead to neurodivergency because the reshaping the brain, just like you described. That's something that I've personally experienced is I have OD. I have OCD tendencies, but not a full diagnosis of OCD. And it's likely linked to being trauma induced. So that's where when I was in that book, I was like, oh, now that makes sense why my therapist said it the way she said it. and why when I'll ask her certain questions, like, well, what about this? What about this? And she's like, no, that's just how your brain is wired and structured now. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, oh, that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. Trauma changes us. It changes how we view and see things, which that's probably the biggest thing that's affected me my entire life is the sense of safety or not feeling safe or not being safe or not being in a safe environment, those kind of things. And that's where the OCD tendencies come in, where that chronic thinking of the worst case scenario and then dwelling on that worst case scenario and then like repeating the thoughts of the worst case scenario. And then I'll get into the me now, right? With the 10 years research. I'm like, don't manifest it. Don't get it out of your brain. Don't dwell on it. Like, breathe it out. And the fun cycle that all that creates. I'm sure you have similar experiences too, where you're just like you almost like get in your own head and you're like, I would say like therapying within your own head where you catch yourself on a thought and then trying to change the thought.
Yeah, I think that's part of what the awareness space is, which is the coaching that I do. So it's being able to witness your thought in real time. So you're kind of it's still you, but you're seeing the thought. You aren't the thought. The thought isn't controlling you because you are looking at it. This is what I kind of like to coach and teach because it's changed my life, I can tell you. Doesn't mean I'm still not affected by stuff, but it's much easier to recover when you see it. But it's yeah, it's a really interesting time because if you take away all these labels and all these names and all these diagnoses, which are very important in many ways, but if you just remove them all a second, your brain has synapses and it fires in reactions to things outside of you and the way your thoughts. The brain just is functioning in a certain way, and I think for it to be its healthiest self, I guess, brain's not a self, you know what I mean? If you think the brain is a person, for it to be its healthiest self it needs to have that flexibility and the ability to adjust based on what in sensory inputs coming into your body, what you're visually seeing, the emotional intensity coming up from your nervous system into your brain. The dream is that it all flows and it's flexible and I don't like the word resilient, but flexible and flowing and adaptable. And I think what happens to us over time is it wears that down and then we start putting up defense mechanisms, walls, and that's in our body and our brain. And I'm going all over the place here, but body keeps the score. We talk about that a lot already, Bezel. Yes, true, the body keeps the score, and the nervous system's part of that, but also the brain rewires. So body keeps the score, so it gets trapped in your body, the response, the action, the emotion, the energy, but then your brain's also rewiring in that. So if you're at war, your body's keeping the score all the way through, and your brain's reshaping itself based on having to cope with the crazy ass stuff it's seeing. And how is it supposed to deal with that? It can't. You can't. It's too much to bear. So your brain has to rewire, put things into little cabinets and hide them away. It's very interesting, isn't it? That how are we supposed to live? We're supposed to just get born and then just chill. How do we avoid this? We can't, can we?
Yeah. No, not at all. And I love your descriptions of it. Like you're saying like the cabinet, just put them in little cabinets, stuff them away, right? It's really being able to relate to what we do with our minds and mentally, because that's what we do, I think, on a daily basis. It ties into a lot of the stuff we'll talk about today, right? It's like just stuff it in, stuff it in, stuff it in, stuff it in. Oh, eventually where you're stuffing it, there's no more room to stuff. It's going to come out.
That's the thing. It has to come out. It has to be held. It has to be processed. It has to be. It doesn't mean you have to go through everything again, but in some way, it has to be acknowledged. I just think if you don't acknowledge pain and suffering, that's something I read about in a self-compassion book the other day. Is if you don't acknowledge the suffering inside yourself in any way, light, heavy, whatever it may be, where's that going? It doesn't just go away, does it? The pain doesn't just disappear. You have to like nurture it and be in your ventral vagal sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system. You have to be in a really beautiful place for your body to heal. It can't heal if you're not in that nervous system state. So you have to get there. But suffering tends to keep us in fight and flight. And I think as much as I know about all the trauma over the years, that really, really confuses your body's ability to naturally do what it needs to do. Essentially, it can no longer do what it naturally needs to do. So yeah, obviously you're a veteran and everything, and I know it's in your family as well with your dad and things like that. So the fact that you're so involved in working with veterans and stuff like that, did you come out, just for people who haven't heard the story before, did you come out of of all of this, saying, I really want to help this community. Why? I know it's probably obvious, but why, Jess? Why is it so important?
I love it. When yeah, so my whole family, like my bloodline is served up to, all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And when I joined the Marine Corps, I got out of the Marine Corps, I came back home, and every step of the way, I just thought I don't want somebody else to have to go through what I went through. So like even enrolling in college as a veteran, it's different than if you're right out of high school and enrolling in college. The process is completely different. And I had some hiccups during my process, and I thought, I'm not going to let any other veteran go through this. So I worked in the office there on campus to help veterans. And I just kind of like kept doing that. And I think of it as it's like, it's my family, it's my people. And, you know, my parents served, my brother served, right? Oh, like almost my entire circle of friends have all served in the military. So for me, it's just I'm taking care of my people, I'm taking care of my family, I'm taking care of my friends. And I do think that it's a natural niche for me just because of my personal experience and being around it my whole life. Not really, I forget about that a lot, like being a child of dual military parents and how that I did not have the same childhood of other people because that was my experience. So just really kind of stepping into and owning just naturally who I am and protecting my friends and families and doing, I don't know, I just feel like I just do what I do. You know, it just seems so natural for me. Is it's just part of who I am, it's part of my being. So that's where I stay. That's my niche space is military and veterans.
Yeah, I think, like you said, maybe you were drawn to it based on even before you left. There was obviously something about you in this nurturing way and really caring about people overcoming, and you've always been about hope as long as I've known you. So I think, yeah, sometimes we just lean into things. They just happen, don't they? They pull us in. And I just think it's so important. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because it's so important what you're doing. Really, really powerful. Um, and that's why it's, yeah, what we're going to talk about here is quite interesting because we're going to look at some statistics now and everything, guys. So from the research I've done, especially in the UK, in theory, if you are already diagnosed with dyspraxia, ADHD, dyslexia, maybe not so much dyslexia, but ADHD, autism, things like that, is you wouldn't get in. So there's lots of emergency services that you wouldn't be able to apply, which I kind of get, but also that's kind of sad that all of these people that maybe really want to do these kind of roles, they really care about supporting people and changing lives by saving them from the depths, whatever it is, they can't. And I think just that's a side note. I just think it's really sad. But I appreciate that maybe there's an issue here with what could happen to the person in a moment, like in a burning fire if you're a fireman, or as a police officer in a really confrontational event, or in the army, um, protecting a village or when it's been attacked. I get it. I totally get it. But it doesn't make it any easier to know that there's something about you in your brain, which means you can't do something you want to do. I just think yeah, that's harsh. Um, but just looking at some notes here, because obviously we're two different countries here, but I found this like really random Ministry of Defense statistical health thing, which has to be publicly shared. It's a full-on document. I was like, okay, I didn't know this was a thing. So it was saying here, as a request that someone was asking about, yeah, Freedom of Information Act 2000. So they did, yeah, here we are. The term neurodiverse has been interpreted as one of the following conditions: ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. So it's saying there's four listed in the Ministry of Defense here. As of the 1st of July 2023, 2,893 currently serving in the UK Armed Forces personnel had at least one code of neurodivergent conditions out of those, at least one, entered into their electronic medical records. So obviously they had to give this information over. Of these, 459 had at least one code for autism. And it breaks it down here. So in the Royal Navy, 483 people. In the Army, 2,162, and RAF, 248. Now, what's interesting here is that if they were already diagnosed, how did they get in? So I'm wondering if it's a late diagnosis, and if you get a late diagnosis, are they going to kick you out? That's the bit I'm not sure about. And a lot of these people won't even know they're neurodivergent. I didn't bloody know till I was 41. So how would I even know, even if I was in the armed forces. This isn't a political thing. I'm just very fascinated by those numbers.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Jess, those numbers feel very low anyway. Just under 3,000. That seems quite low for the entire.
Yeah. Well, and I think because of our difference in size and structure and numbers, so we're very same here in the U.S. is that for specifically people who are diagnosed with ADHD, one of the things that they require is you can't have been on medication for 24 months. But we do that with other diagnoses as well. There's like you can't have had scoliosis or treatment for scoliosis within like a 2-year time span before you join. You can't have flat feet. Like there's some interesting medical diagnosis, but with all medical diagnoses, there's waivers as well. So there is a waiver, a medical waiver, if you had ADHD diagnosis prior to enlisting. So it's all kind of circumstantial. They say no, but I mean, you have to get waivers for tattoos. So there is kind of like, it's interesting to see. There's not a whole lot of data saying what the numbers are there, but there was a report that, autism was listed as a strict disqualifying condition with no waiver. But the ADHD, there was a research that said for an active duty military in 2018, it was 2.8% in the United States, according to the health.mil, which equates to about 41,000 people for our total forces. But we have a lot of military and lots of different branches and stuff like that too. I didn't actually dive in to see. I'm going to assume that included the National Guards, but it might not have. Well, it's no active military, so no, it shouldn't include the National Guards and active duty numbers. But yeah, 2.8% in 2018 was the most recent data on health.mil that I found, and it was 41,000 people serving in the U.S. military. So
Yeah, it's interesting that as well, because I think it depends on what department they're in as well. There's different aspects to the whole structure from top to bottom of the armed forces, emergency services. So it's obvious, it's on paper that where this all lands in. But I feel that I'm presuming the main reason they're doing this is the risk to fellow soldiers, for example. I presume it's more to do with your response to something could impact your team rather than yourself, but yourself would be involved. I don't know. I don't want to get into any of this because I have no idea, and it's probably really, really tricky. But it's easy for us to sit here and say, "Oh, this is a trait of ADHD, and then this could happen in this certain moment." But there is so much any neurotype can offer a situation. There can be something very different that can be delivered by a different neurotype in any given situation. But I guess they're trying to just balance out, risk over reward, isn't it? And I guess they're just not got the resources, are they, to do full on psych evals to figure out where best to put people. I guess they just don't have that capacity, do they?
yeah, no, we do in the U.S. The main thing that we do, we call it an ASVAB. Basically, you take kind of like an admissions test, like they're like getting into college. You take a test and you get this score, and the score is supposed to tell you a job fields. You have to get a certain score to get in a job field. Well, we always laugh because there's waivers for everything, right? So, for example, in one of the job fields, an administrative clerk, the person who is documenting your military history, the person who is making sure you get paid appropriately, can have an ASVAB waiver, which means you did not score high enough. So we'll put you in this field. So we always laugh at like certain waivers to get people into job fields. It's like that didn't make any sense at all. But there's a lot of benefits. I mean, just embracing the benefits of our brain chemistry. I can also see the fears, right? We always fear the things we don't know, but the fears of those, I don't want to say like side effects. I don't think that's the appropriate term, but reactions maybe is there's all these unique strengths and talents, the way our brains are wired and structured on their own, whether formally diagnosed with a neurodivergent or not diagnosed with neurodivergency. But there is the fear of like if there's cognitive or attention issues or difficulty concentrating and easily distracted. I just think of my personal experience in the Marine Corps is we're on the rifle range and we all move as one. And if somebody does not move, if you don't pull your muzzle up at the same time as everyone else, or you do something that is out of order, you will get physically tackled and removed from the rifle range. And I have seen that actually happen because somebody did not follow the rules. So I could see that being very difficult for someone if they were struggling with things like concentration, or if they're easily distracted, right? They may not hear the command, and that's a safety thing. But there's also, like you said, when it comes to certain jobs, there's people who have this intense power within their brain chemistry to be able to be hyper fixated on specific topics and can be the best person at that topic and that role, that position. That could be a huge benefit, but there is the unfortunate drawback of that piece. And then with there's so much research out there. Those of us in first responder roles are more likely to then be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress from an incident. So now we have a group of individuals that are more likely to experience that. Then we're exposing them to a field that is already heightened experiencing it. Then I kind of think of like, is that good for them as well? Putting them in a situation where we know the outcome is very highly likely without a neurodivergent diagnosis, to thus have an additional brain chemistry complication down the road.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was amazing. Thank you. Love that. And it's yeah, it's interesting because you get two sides of the same coin there. So like you said, you've got the easily distracted and stuff, but there's the hyper focus. When they focus in on something, it's just incredibly crystal clear focus, could end up being really useful. I'm being really, really watering this down because I'm a movie fan, but think of a sniper. All right.
Yes.
So hyper
I mean,
focus. So
yeah.
I know I'm watering it down and I get it. And there's films where they do this, like what's the one with Ben Affleck, where he's got autism? I watched the second one the other day.
Accountant.
Accountant. So they're
Accountant.
saying
Yes.
because of his autism, he's able to be an elite killer. So it's like, okay, that's ridiculous. You're going way too far there. But the point is that a neurotype presents a certain way, and even neurotypicals are the same. Neurotypicals, there's positives that are the way their brain is wired, and negatives based on not negatives, but problematic maybe based on childhood experiences, kind of people they've been around, maybe a tendency to have a heightened nervous system, so they're more likely to get anxiety. Everyone's different, and I think we just, I guess, have to give things a go. But there's only so much we can do. But I think if people want to serve, I'm sure there are ways, I hope, where you can do that, even if it's behind the scenes, paying the soldiers, whatever. So you're serving an organization that you care about and you believe is doing good work. I think that's the key, isn't it? Is that if we want to serve, we can, isn't it?
Yeah. I wonder, do you have something here in America? We have the Medical Reserve Corps. So it is a civilian volunteer program. Basically, it's nationwide, and each state has their own leader that you can sign up for, and you can select what your certifications are if you have any, or your skill sets if you have any. So ours are mostly used if there's natural disasters. So we have a lot of them. Where I'm at, we have a lot of tornadoes. We have a lot of fires. That's actually our number one natural disaster in Oklahoma is fires, but we're known for our tornadoes. So the Medical Reserve Corps are the people who volunteer to come serve these communities that are going through a tragedy and a crisis. And you don't have to be necessarily in the medical field. You don't have to be a nurse, but you also don't have to have served in the military. But it's another option that you can serve your community.
Yeah, that's true. We do have, their names escape me now, maybe the reserves. But yeah, you have people who are in the army, but not fully. So for some reason, I cannot remember it. But yeah, there's loads of people doing that. It's amazing. It's the same with the police here. We have um, people that aren't officially the police, but are working out on the streets, on the bicycles, and they're going around, and they can call in the police if they need to. Why? No, I can't remember any of the names of these things. But that is such a wonderful way for people who want to serve, support the police force without having to go through the whole thing of training and getting into it and passing all the exams and then making it official, they can help. And I think that's so amazing. I just want there to be options for people in some way, because to be closed off from a natural part of yourself that wants to help, I think we need to let that shine out, you know. So, so important. So, yeah, as much as I would love to stay in and around this topic, I just wanted to float gently into the emergency services and in the UK here. So I've got a little quote here that I got off the old Google there, which is there are no precise official figures for the number of neurodivergent people in the UK emergency services. However, if the general UK population statistics, roughly 1 in 7 people being neurodivergent, are applied to the roughly 750,000 to 1.5 million people working in the emergency services here, the number would be tens to hundreds of thousands of people being neurodivergent. Many emergency services organizations are developing new policies and gathering data to better understand and support their neurodivergent staff. So again, the likelihood of people being in the emergency services that don't even know they're neurodivergent, that's a whole other thing. And how they treat neurodivergent people, the policies, that's not for today. That's a different episode. We're not talking about how these people help us. But to me, it means that if people want to be in the fire service, want to be in the police, want to be an ambulance driver or a medic or a doctor, whatever it may be, I'm just so glad that maybe that industry might again allow space in and around that to be able to do those things. Any knowledge of, in your opinion, going back your way with that? Especially, I know obviously you have so many fires there, so I presume your fire services must be huge. I hope they are on this funding.
We're very blessed, especially the city that I live in specifically has an amazing fire response. They have been so lovely. But as far as neurodivergent diagnoses and those working in emergency services, there's not a lot of data on it, but I also couldn't find anything specifically that was a disqualifier. So unlike the Department of Defense for the military, there are these rules. I didn't find anything that was generalized saying, I think it just depends on the department or the agency. So that's something too, is we have the different trainings for each. So like our police, our fire, our EMS, but a police department here in my city has different requirements, different training than a police department that's 45 minutes north of me. So I think it probably is very specific to the department, whether or not they ask or require you to disclose any of that. But I also think it's, like I said earlier, this we fear what we don't know. So because there's this fear of what we don't know, we have this label, right? Oh, neurodivergency. Ooh, I don't know what that means. Therefore, it's a bad thing somehow. Because that's, I don't know. I feel like that's how people think a lot, at least in America, is like if we don't know what it is, we fear it. So therefore, it's bad. So I think people, even if they do have a diagnosis for neurodivergency or they think that they might be neurodivergent, they don't want to either discover it because they don't want the diagnosis, or they don't want to tell other people because they don't know. So therefore, they're going to react in a way that is not loving and supportive. Unfortunately, I think that is our general society. So when it comes to the research, there isn't really any. But I also, I don't see people wanting to line up saying, "Hey, I've been diagnosed with neurodivergency and I'm a first responder. Let me step out to this thing that people don't know and potentially lose my job over it." So I think that's a big part of why we don't have the data. But I didn't find anything again that explicitly stated that you can't be in one of these roles because of that. I have people that I know who have been diagnosed with ADHD who work in healthcare systems. So depending also on your definition of emergency medicine, if we're just looking at, like ambulances, fire, police, those kind of things, it's definitely a big opening. And I think that there's a lot of research that could be done, but finding ways to be able to do it that is safe and beneficial.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's interesting because you said that, because if you think about it, the statement I had was like, oh, if you base it on the average population, that's the best you've got. That's the best we can find. If you base it on this. So it does show, and we know from the time that I've been doing this now, nearly a year, this is still really early. The last couple of years, neurodivergent awareness has gone through the roof because of social media, which is great, and TikTok and everything, which is brilliant. Obviously comes with lots of misinformation, which is not brilliant and can cause us to be looked upon, like you just said, in a judgmental manner and then isolated and put to one side, which is why it's so important that that's what you said there is key, is that if someone's already in these industries and they're now suspecting because maybe their kid has been diagnosed, maybe they have it too. You're right. They're going to be like, shit, am I going to lose my job? So they might actually have to take the choice to not even get diagnosed deliberately, not discovering their truth and not being able to move forward, which I think's devastating on one side, but I get why they want to stay in their dream career and they want to support their family and get, food on the table. So because this is all so new and we're still heavily judged, it's really tricky because on top of that is a spectrum of how it impacts your life. They call it, high functioning ADHD. I'm not sure about high functioning is an appropriate word to use, but how it impacts you depending on your environment, where you live, the kind of family support you have. It may not present as seriously because you're supported. It may not present as seriously because your neurotype is a lot lower impact level. So there's that as well, that you've got someone with some of those traits which are very useful, but they're not impactful. So they don't even need to know anyway. They don't need to be diagnosed. So I was a bit of a rant there, but it's true to say that we're so early into this and there's still so much awareness of not seeing it as something to be feared if you don't understand it, like you said. But it's true, isn't it? In that way, we're not going to do anything that's going to risk our livelihood, are we? Even if it's our truth.
Mm. Yeah. And I think one thing too is research is we're always like 4 to 5 years behind on anything because by the time we do the research, we analyze it, we clean the data, we promote the data, and the actual term neurodivergent hasn't even really been around. It was coined like in the late the late 1900s. um like late 1990s, so you're looking at like 25 years, people really embracing what they've been given, like embracing their bodies and being able to speak openly about what's going on in their brains. So that I think is a huge shift too, is that we didn't even really talk about this. And now we're talking about it and we're talking about it more heavily and we're supporting it more and more people are able to come forward and say, hey, my brain functions like that too. Or, hey, I have a loved one that thinks like that and processes like that. How can I support them? So I feel like because now there is this, I would say like there's this term, right? The neurodivergent term that people are now more willing to understand it or claim that they're part of that group. They're part of that organization, if that makes sense, is that it's more, I don't know, my brain wants to say like it's more okay because it's not as taboo. We're bringing it out of the darkness. And I think that's one thing that we see with suicide, right? Is that we keep it taboo, we keep it in the darkness, nobody talks about it, therefore nobody understands it, and then the people who need the help aren't getting the help. And people aren't able to live the lives that they can with either the help they need or embracing the unique skills that have already been given to them in their brain's neurochemistry.
Yeah, you're spot on. And in many ways, they're having to suppress revealing things or suppressing their truth or suppressing this urge that their body or brain needs. If they need to, what they call stimming, or if they need uh, fidget, subtle fidget toys with them to get them rooted into the moment, all these things, they're not going to want to do any of that stuff. So they suppress, they mask, they put on a show to they're calling it more camouflage now than masking. Like this industry is constantly changing. The awareness, the wordings, you can't say that anymore. They got to say this. So I'm trying to keep up. But they're trying to move away from masking and bring in camouflage. So camouflaging our natural things by camouflaging it with a different behavior, which I quite like. I think that's quite a good way to describe it, actually. Because your truth is being hidden in the background, you're displaying something else. I think that's quite powerful. Um, and that will take a toll. I think in the end, the people that are going to walk out of these industries completely burnt out and on their knees it's happening to them, not those around them, because they're having to put on that show in the process. And you mentioned suicide there, so this is a trigger warning if anyone wants to skip. I'll try and put in some show notes to skip it. But this is a bit depressing looking this up because I knew it was going to be high. Um, because yeah, I get it. And it says, as far as the UK goes anyway, autistic people, for example, are at higher risk of suicide than non-autistic people. Figures are shown as many as 11 to 66% of autistic adults had a thought about suicide during their lifetime, and up to 35% had planned and attempted so. Research shows that adults with ADHD are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide. 1 in 4 women with ADHD have made attempts on their life, while men are more likely to end their life. Accidental death, obviously, it's also common as well. But to be honest, Jess, from a neurodivergent person, the people I've spoken to, I wouldn't be surprised by this. Number one, your self-esteem is in the toilet. You don't feel like you fit in. You feel like you're a weirdo. You feel like you're broken. You feel like no one's going to understand you. You're never going to get a partner that can deal with the presentations of that. So that's one aspect of it. And because the way you feel, the way your brain is racing, and it just won't turn off, it doesn't have a regulatory system in the brain that allows it to quieten down. You have to really work on that. Racing thoughts, and then emotionally in your body, everything you feel is so more intense. You're much more affected by stress, and with RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, you feel things, rejection really deeply, and it's unbearable. And I've had many times in my life where the low mood, the dorsal vagal sensation was horrendous. My anxiety was so bad. I am not surprised people just want to end that because it is so uncomfortable and you don't have the tools or the support because you're being ostracized for being strange. And that is heartbreaking. So obviously you work a lot in this field and you see it a lot, obviously, with PTSD and post-war and all this kind of stuff. But I can see why I don't know about, you can share with me, but as far as suicide is concerned, I totally get why people do it when it's so unbelievably unbearable. Who wants to sit in that? I'll hand over to you because you know more about it, but I think it makes sense with neurodivergence.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it when you come down to it, the simplistic way of suicide and overdoses is people want their pain to end. So just like you described, that's a very painful experience, but pain is physical, pain is mental. Our body is both, right? Physical and mental. So when you get this overwhelming sense of pain, you just want the pain to end. And I'm not sure if it's like this in the UK. I know in America, when it comes to overdose deaths, they're not ruled as suicides majority of the time because coroners and medical examiners, they have to prove intent. So what they lean on is, was there a note left? If there's a note left, then okay, they intended to purposely overdose to end their pain. But our research also shows that 25% of gunshot wounds to the head leave notes. So when I talk about suicide and overdose, I talk about them jointly because they're both parties were ending pain. So if you're overdosing, you're taking in a lot of medications to try and end your pain, not necessarily overdoses with the intent of ending pain permanently, but wanting to end pain in the moment, right? And how you described it is exactly how I was thinking of it and interpreting it. If you're already feeling like you're less than, right? You're already the one who is, like you said, the weirdo in the crowd that people make fun of and ostracize. You're already feeling isolated. You're feeling alone. There's thoughts of feeling of a burden. You're having to rely on other people. And the biggest thing through the suicide mortality review that I did, the one thing that connected all the deaths was loss of or fear of loss of a significant relationship. Well, if you struggle to build and make and maintain significant relationships, you're constantly losing that connection. And we're meant to be connected. That's how whether you're spiritual or not, like humans were created to be around other humans. We were meant to connect with each other and build these communities. So when you're not feeling like you have a significant relationship, when you're not feeling connected with this community, you are at a higher rate of suicide because that's what suicide becomes. It's that feeling of, there's you're boxed in, you're not supported, you don't have connection, there's no light, you don't see the hope. And with the rates here in America, is I found a study from our National Institute of Health, and there was persons with autism had a prevalence of 34.2% for suicide ideation. So they were thinking about suicide, while 24.3% had attempted suicide, but luckily survived. They didn't go on to say how many people had died from suicide that were also diagnosed with autism in that study, but it did say that they're 7 times higher if you have autism to have thoughts of suicide than peers that have not been diagnosed with autism. So it's it's really sad to see that, but I love that we're having this conversation because we talk about this, right? So being able to get other people to hopefully listen in and recognize that and talk about that is that, if again, going back to those emotional traits, the ability to connect, the ability to talk and build these relationships and bonds, if that's what would be so wonderful, if we could teach our youth that at early stages, when we're seeing that they're having these difficulties, whether they have the diagnosis of a neurodivergent brain or they don't, is being able to build those skills, because that's what's going to be able to connect them and ground them as well as a society. Obviously, there's stuff which I love that you do this in your coaching, is being able to help people ground themselves, but if we can help also connect them to groups and communities. So doing that self-grounding and then furthering that and being able to ground ourselves within our communities is such a deterrent for suicide.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. And I think, like I've been saying in all the four previous podcast themes, is that, you know, feeling seen, heard, understood, to be held, to be accepted. You know, these are all really powerful tools to help us. What they would say is be ventral vagal, parasympathetic. So when you're in that state, you are connected, your gut is digesting, everything is working in your body properly, your mind is calmer because you're feeling present and joyful and steady. This is the nervous system state we need to be in for us to thrive and for our our immune system to operate in the way it needs to. And the mission is always to get back to ventral vagal. Not always. We're going to go down sympathetic a little bit. You know, to play the game of tennis, you want to be ventral vagal, joyful and regulated, but also with a little bit of fight and flight, so you can spring and hit the ball. So you've got that perfect blend of going up and down, fight and flight, ventral, fight and flight, ventral. Perfection. That's what you're looking for exercise. As soon as you drop into dorsal, shut down, flop, fawn, which is what it may happen a lot with PTSD as well. When you hear the old classic, you know, you hear an engine, don't you, blow out, and it sounds like a
Mm.
gunshot, and you jumped, you know, dive to the floor. This is all part of it as well. But I think what I just said about all those key things that we need as humans, that's how we thrive. I think anything that isn't that, and you're in it for days and months and years, I don't know if that's the kind of life that people are going to be like, yeah, that's cool. Oh, yeah, I can live like this. You see what I mean? It's so complicated yet so simple, but it's so hard to access for some reason. In this day, it's so hard to access that pure connection, groundedness, and steadiness, isn't it? I don't know why it's become so difficult for us, isn't it?
I think we're such a fast-paced society now and culture now. Like everything is online, and my friend can attest to this. I don't know. I say embarrassing, but it's not embarrassing. It's just who I am. Uh, I just recently took a flight. It was a 3-hour flight, direct flight to where I need to go. And we're sitting there, we're having a conversation, and I want to pull the world out of my pocket and Google and research the topics we're talking about, right? That goes back to the like, gotta have the info. And she was laughing at first because I was like, oh, I pulled my phone out. And after like the fourth time pulling my phone out, I said, that's it. I'm going to pay the $10 for the Wi-Fi because I need to be able to look this up right now in this moment. And I laughed so hard because I'm like, okay, yeah, it could be an addiction. All right. Um, but also looking at our connection to things, and we're not so connected to people anymore as we are like online. and building relationships. I mean, like ours is a rarity, right? We built a relationship online and we've become genuine friends over these years and supporting each other outside our podcast, but that's not our societal norm. It's quick access, notification, quick response. People don't have conversations and connect through communication as it is, whether there is any kind of brain chemistry change. But at the same time, our societies and our cultures have changed, which thus I think is changing our brain chemistry. If you go all the way back, right? We're not hunter gatherers anymore. We're not even grocery shoppers anymore. I don't know how it is over there, but you type it into an app and someone gets my groceries for me. One of the ways I automate my life to do so much. And then they bring them to my doorstep. I don't even have to interact with the person. They just drop them off. Sometimes I see them and they wave. Other than that, it's all done through an app. So as we're growing with this technology, we're not really growing our connectiveness. So I don't think a lot of people take advantage of the connectiveness that we have with technology, but they use it in ways that then is taking us further and further and further away from being connected and supporting each other as just general human beings.
Yeah, thanks so much. I love it. We've covered everything today, I feel, about the human experience in 2025, which I think is part of the problem, probably. But it, and is and just yet agreeing with everything you just said there, and also you said touched on it lightly in one of the sentences there, which is what this is doing to our brain over time. It's rewiring our brain, the way we interact with the world, the way we interact with people, and the way we input information and process information is being delivered in a way that's different, and then our brain is adapting to that. So we are reshaping all of our brains over time, away from, say, what a Buddhist monk would be doing today to somebody who's a hardcore Instagram influencer, completely different things. But there's joy to be had in all of those things. And behind me, as you can see with the plants and everything that people know about my world famous plant family, and my cat and my garden and the beautiful city I am with vast views, swimming in the sea. These are all ways of connecting to something vast, something joyful, awe-ridden, powerful. With a cat or a dog or an animal, there's something very special about watching them be present and still and not thinking about anything or complaining about anything or worrying about anything, and the cat showing you the way to live. I mean, all of this is a way of connecting. And I'm saying this for anybody that's listening that's, struggled over the years, is that connection could be so many things. And it could be a passion that you love. You could be really connected to knitting and it brings you so much joy. And you're so proud. Oh my God, I just made this. This is all connection. It's ventral. It's beautiful. And then maybe knitting leads you to a knitting club online. Then you knit online and then you meet up for a little event that's in your city. You just got to start somewhere with connection rather than staying at this monotone flatness that we feel, because we're not getting that from the quick, sharp dopamine blasting activities. And AI obviously is coming along. I can talk to Gemini on my phone or ChatGPT, the lady on there, and you can have a really nice chat. And they've even made the AI people like Gemini and this other one to start talking like a human, where they start saying now. They go and yes, and they might snigger. They're actually making this AI now use intonation like that so they feel more real. It's fun. It's kind of cool. I'm not sure how that's helping our brain or if that's doing anything. Is that a form of connection that's useful? Maybe. It feels like a person. So I don't know where that's all going. So yeah, I know. It's very interesting. That's for another episode. Um, but yeah, I mean, put the world to rights there. But yeah, this has been really powerful today, Jess. Sadly, it has to finish. But I think it's interesting. I think if I'm taking anything away from all of this, to be honest, is that there's so much more to do with neurodivergence, as far as how it's perceived, how big industries will see it, the armed forces, emergency services, schools, wherever it is. So much more work to do, so much more understanding. So those with neurodivergence can feel like they're being seen in the same way as a neurotypical and not slightly side-eyed. Interesting character. We need to move away from that and for us all to accept all our beautiful brains. We all have different brains. We all have something to offer. I don't know if there's a world that's going to do that. It's the same with changing the minds of racists. They're not going to, you're not going to be able to change their minds. So it's kind of somehow we need to I don't know. I'm excited. 10 years from now, I can't wait to see how far this has all gone. And to have people like yourself coming on who is keen to learn about neurodivergence and how it impacts the kind of work that you're doing, I think is what we need. We need people like you in our circles, in our communities, fighting the good fight, from the outside in, if that makes sense. I just want to thank you for all the work that you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everything that you're doing and the good that you're putting out into the world, because I think that that's something that we forget often, is that we're all unique. And like you said, it all of our different brain chemistries, whether you have a diagnosis or you don't, sometimes the diagnosis is able to help you learn more about yourself and grow yourself and embrace that uniqueness that you have. And I think it's important for us to really own who we are, own that uniqueness and make that your power, because it is. It takes all kinds to make the world go round. And even if someone listening does have a diagnosis of neurodivergent and they're feeling less than, you're not. You just have to embrace that unique skill you have. And if you don't know what that unique skill you have, being able to find somebody like yourself, a coach, being able to help guide through that and find what that is, because our world needs everybody here moving it forward and embracing each other and just making it a more positive tomorrow for the next generations, because we're the change every day.
I love that. Thank you so much. And you beat me to the punch because one of the questions was your parting message to our audience. And you just did it. And it was fantastic. And I love it. So thank you so much. But there's one last question that was before that I'm going to ask you, which is really lovely. So it doesn't have to be neurodivergent related. It works for everybody. So could you give me a key moment or achievement in your life that you're most proud of that you achieved despite the struggles that you've had? So I want you to think of a time that you were already struggling, but you still managed to do this thing and you're so proud of yourself and you embrace it.
Ah, I have a couple examples. Like, a simple one is just getting through the Marine Corps. As much as people told me I couldn't do it, I wouldn't do it, and people laughed at me because I'm small. For those who have never got to meet me in person,
Mhm.
I am 5 foot 2 inches or 62 inches. Sorry, I don't remember my centimeters. So I'm a small person, and I'm about 115 pounds, and I was always ridiculed for that. Like, you won't make it, you won't make it, and I did, and I was one of the top performers in the physical fitness. Then I had an injury. But the other thing that's even more recent, because I realized that that was coming up on almost 20 years ago, which is kind of scary to think about. But one thing that I didn't think in the moment, we have lots of moments where we don't think we're going to survive and we make it through anyway, because we have this strength that we never knew existed, was staying with my husband for 9 days in an intensive care unit while he was in full blown respiratory distress, and being able to have to think and be on and research and review his medical chart and be there for him, and not give up, because I think it's easy for us to give up and walk away from situations, but we're stronger than we think we are. So those are probably two of the things that I'm most proud of and that people brag about me the most now, after, the Marine Corps, people thinking I couldn't do it. And then with the staying by my husband's side, because it's easy for us to walk away. It is. But for me, it's easier to stay. So,
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, really powerful. And I think that's why I encourage people to check out your podcast, Unbreakable Hope, where we hear more stories like this. But yeah, those two things you shared there are huge. And I think yeah, for partners to stick together through rough times, well, way more than rough. But you know what I mean, is I don't know. There's something kind of weirdly powerful. If you come out the other side of that, I mean, Jesus, you're binded for life then, aren't you? I mean, talk about connection at that point. But yeah, so beautiful. Yeah, my partner's not been well for a year now, and it's been bloody stressful, but it's made us a lot stronger and more close together, and it's us against the world now. So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's weird how the world plays these things in front of you, and you have to adjust. Whee. But yeah, what a message of hope. So yes, go and check out Jess's podcast, everybody. Unbreakable Hope. I'll put it in the show notes. I am involved in that in various ways, so I do encourage you to go and check it out. But yeah, I want to thank you so much. Where can we find you online? Where do you mostly hang out, and what kind of content should we expect?
ooh. So I'm mostly active on Instagram, which most of my stuff feeds back to Facebook, but my Instagram is Jessica Rose H Johnson. And I share a lot about just brain health in general. I'll get heavy with some suicide prevention stuff and just trying to share as much hope as possible because our world is already dark. So just encouraging people to seek the light. You can check me out there. And I also have my links to my website and my podcast there as well.
Amazing stuff. Yes, I will put as many links as I can in the show notes, everybody, so go and check it out. But yeah, look, we're going to do plenty more work together over the years. I'm sure you'll be back on this show, like a lot of people have come back on. My Awareness Space podcast will be returning, which will be non-neurodivergent based. So you'll be the prime person for that one as well. I will be re-releasing all those. So thank you so much, Jessica Rose, for being on the show. Thank you for your friendship. So thank you for listening, everybody, and stick around for the Anquay Mushroom Gummies advert and also a little bit of information about how you can help yourself using the ND Free shop. That'll be in the next clip, so stick around for that. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. I want to take this time to let you know about the ND Free shop and directory coming soon to my brand new website, The Awareness Space. This site is in the process of being built and will also feature all you need to know about using my coaching services, including those with ADHD. ND Free, alongside the podcast, is here to bring awareness of tools, products, services, and other supportive ideas that can help those with their neurodivergent presentations. Head over to our website and visit our ND Free shop for a full listing, including chill zones, fidget collections, including their chill balls, which me and my whole family adore. On this page, you'll also find a range of coaches and other therapeutic services that may be able to help you in your life. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. ND Free is in partnership with Anquay Mushroom Gummies. Since my ADHD diagnosis in October 2024, I had been trying to find a supplement to help my struggle to focus, ease my brain fog, and help my overall energy. I'd been getting mixed results from multiple supplements until I came across Anquay's Mushroom Gummies. So I removed all other supplements and began to take 2 of the delicious tasting gummies each morning after eating. By the 4th week, I really started to notice I could focus for longer and my brain fog wasn't anywhere near as bad. Naturally, they may not work for everybody, but I feel it's my mission to at least let you all know about these gummies. They include 10 functional mushrooms within them, including lion's mane, shiitake, and turkey tail mushrooms. With their non-GMO, gluten-free, and filler-free gummies, they offer a tasty solution to an ND brain. You can order one-off pouches with 60 gummies inside or sign up to the discounted monthly bundles. Best of all, if you use my code ONM15, you'll get 15% off your order. Visit www.anquay.com, that is www.ankhway.com.